Pictures at 13. Endgame, Part 1. Most of the military wars since the Second World War have been the same age-old battle on munitions of an apostate Christian church, communism and Islam, in which, for example, of the apostate Christian church, the symbols represent Luciferian or pagan worship being at the very essence. The secrets of a false church and their worship lie in these occult symbols which only the elite fully understand. Amalgamated beasts of Lucifer's devising ascend for war and action against the people of God on the world stage, their battle of the great Almighty which man has thought to use against the weak inhabitants of the earth, are used by the Almighty against these men of war and destruction. The principalities and powers of earth are in bitter revolt against the God of heaven. They are filled with hatred against all who serve him, and soon, very soon, is to be fought the last great battle between good and evil. Lucifer, the great deceiver, enters directly upon the scene, literally. Job 38:22, right from the very beginning, he said this: Hast thou entered into the treasures of the snow, or hast thou seen the treasures of the hail, which I have reserved against the time of trouble, speaking of the time in which we are coming, against the day of battle and war. Revelation 16:21, There fell upon men a great hail out of heaven, every stone about the weight of a talent, and men blasphemed God because of the plague of hail, for the plague thereof was exceedingly great. God's people are to hear a bold, decided testimony for truth, unfolding the purposes of God by the witness of pen and voice. In place after place, they are to proclaim the message of God's word, arousing men and women to comprehend the truth. It's an epic journey for mankind of adventure and woe, for life and existence itself. God is coming to take his servants away from the battle scene of sin and corruption to give them the pure joy of heaven. Some will fall like John the Baptist, the greatest born amongst women, and others will be taken directly to heaven. Without the Word of God, world events can be quite confusing, because the enemy works with confusion. Ignatius Loyola, remember his words, nor will it contribute a little to our advantage if with caution and secrecy we foment and heighten the animosities that arise amongst princes and great men, even to such a degree that they may weaken each other. So create a situation of war and let it happen. But if there appear any likelihood of reconciliation, then as soon as possible let us endeavour to be mediators, lest others prevent us. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, for we are as a people inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret proceedings, and to secret oaths, for we are opposed around the world by the monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. John F. Kennedy. God is permitting the elements of confusion and disorder to bear sway for a season. But not always will that be the situation. A power from beneath is working with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in those who are binding themselves together in secret societies. This was spoken of and written of a long time ago. But God is a God of gods, a King of kings, as Nebuchadnezzar said, a revealer of secrets. So through the revelation of Jesus Christ, the opening of the little book which was sealed, the book of Daniel, we have the revelation of those things which would be hid, would be secret and not revealed to us, are revealed through God's word. The Reagans. Nancy later wrote, Astrology was simply one of the ways I coped with the fear I felt after my husband almost died. Was astrology one of the reasons? I don't really believe it was, but I don't really believe it wasn't. Ronald and Nancy lunched every Wednesday with the top Hollywood astrologer Carol Reiter, all during the late 40s and 50s. Emerging from a particularly credulous Southern California culture, Nancy and Ronald Reagan relied on an astrologer in public and private matters, unknown to the voting public. Some portion of the decision-making that influences the future of our civilization is plainly in the hands of charlatans. President Ronald Reagan and First Lady Nancy Reagan regularly attended the church, that is the Bel Air Presbyterian Church, after leaving office, and Mrs. Reagan still occasionally attends. So do many other famous celebrities, but they're involved also in the cult. On December 4, 1981, President Ronald Reagan signed Executive Order 12333, an executive order intended to extend powers and responsibilities of the U.S. Intelligence Agency and direct the leaders of the U.S. federal agencies to cooperate fully with the CIA request for information. This order, of which little was known, would see the ramifications of this bill being passed from the time of Ronald Reagan to now in 2013, or that which has just passed, with the revelations that Snowden gave us. Executive Order 12333, ability to function outside the confines of a warrant or court order if approved by the Attorney General, ability to operate outside the confines of jurisdictional or congressional oversight as long as it is in the pursuit of foreign intelligence, and we know it was also in intelligence from the homeland. Reagan's legacy. American ideology after a failed presidency. In what way would it be failed? Extended finance on military programs, from creditor to the biggest debtor nation, deregulation and privatization, that which has swept the world, the Western world, and is letting the Western world down. Repealed the fairness doctrine, fair coverage of opposing views to national coverage. The Third World War, the third bloodiest war in all history. Back in the 70s, the Church Committee investigation uncovered what would now be estimated to be over 3,000 major operations and 10,000 minor operations above constitutional law. So it's been going on for a long time, the overriding of the Constitution, overthrow of functioning constitutions of the Third World, secret armies in all the continents of the world, ethnic uprising, death squads, drug trafficking to pay for the military operations, over 6 million killed. The Knights of Malta. There is a fascinating history here with the Knights of Malta and the CIA. William Joseph Wild Bill Donovan was a United States soldier, lawyer, intelligence officer, and diplomat. Donovan is best remembered as the wartime head of the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, a precursor to the Central Intelligence Agency during the Second World War. He is also known as the father of American intelligence and the father of Central Intelligence. But note who he is. Donovan graduated from Columbia in 1905 and was a member of the Knights of Malta. Donovan was a graduate of Columbia Law School and became an influential Wall Street lawyer. Donovan was named Coordinator of Information. Donovan began to lay the groundwork for a centralized intelligence program. For whom was he laying the groundwork? James Jesus Angleton was chief of the CIA counterintelligence staff from 1954 to 1975, Knight of Malta. Returning to Washington, he was employed by the various successor organizations to the OSS, eventually becoming one of the founder officers of the Central Intelligence Agency. John A. McCone. After the disaster of the Bay of Pigs invasion, President John F. Kennedy forced the resignation of the CIA Director Alan Dulles and some of his staff. McCone replaced Dulles on November 29, 1961, Knight of Malta. Casey played a very large part, in shaping Reagan's foreign policy. Trained at Fordham University, trained by the Jesuits. Knight of Malta, works for the Jesuit Order, NATO, CIA, the intelligence world. Tennant graduated from Georgetown University, Jesuit University, 1976 with Bachelor of Science degree in Foreign Service, and received a Master of International Affairs degree from the Columbia University in 1978. Tennant was appointed Deputy Director of the Central Intelligence Agency in July 1995 after John Deutsch's abrupt resignation in December 1996. Tennant served as acting director until he was officially appointed the position on July 11, 1997. See, to get into a top position, it's important to go through a Jesuit university. Tennant served through the end of the Clinton administration and well into the terms of the George W. Bush. Tennant embarked on a mission to regenerate the CIA, which had fallen on hard times since the end of the Cold War. Why would that be so? Because a lot of their missions had been exposed as for their barbaric and cruel nature and failed attempts. Tennant testifies before a public hearing of the September 11 Commission investigating 9/11 that he did not meet with Bush in August 2001, the month before the September 11 attacks. Same evening after the hearings, a CIA spokesman corrected Tennant's testimony, stating that Tennant did indeed meet with Bush twice in August. Tennant, in his memoirs, writes of his memorable visit to Bush at Bush's ranch in Crawford, Texas in August 2001. Now, Bush, of course, very close to the CIA, his father being an active member of the CIA and ex-president, of course, and George Bush had extended the powers of the CIA with the Iraq War. To that point, they weren't to carry arms because of things that had gone wrong in the past. Their powers had been taken away from them, and their powers were extended at the time Bush came to office. In August 2007, a secret report written by the CIA Inspector General was made public. Originally written in 2005 but kept secret, 19-page summary states that Tennant knew the dangers of Al-Qaeda well before September 2001, but that the leadership of the CIA did not do enough to prevent any attacks. Tennant reacted to the publication of this report by calling it flat wrong, citing in particular the planning efforts of the past 2 years. Brennan was the son of an Irish immigrants from Roscommon, was raised in North Bergen, New Jersey. He attended the Immaculate Heart of Mary Elementary School and graduated from the St. Joseph of Palisades High School in West New York, New Jersey, before enrolling at the Fordham University in New York, a Jesuit university. In April 2012, Brennan was the first Obama administration official to publicly acknowledge CIA drone attacks in Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, Libya, Afghanistan, and elsewhere. In his speech, he argued for the legality, morality, and effectiveness of the program. Under the auspices of the Disposition Matrix database, by which people outside of war zones were put on the list of drone targets. Morris Davis, a former chief prosecutor for the Guantanamo military commissions, compared Brennan to Canadian Omar Khadr, who was convicted of committing murder in violation of the law of war. No surrender, unforgiving, sends the recipients into eternity and kills the innocent as well as the guilty. No trial or evidence required. Operation in countries in which war has not been declared. The US has never swerved from their intended purpose, though it may have been generally assumed as abandoned the old idea of Star Wars and control of space. This is what these space missions were all about. In 1952, von Braun first published his concept of a manned space station in a Collier weekly magazine series of articles entitled Man Will Conquer Space Soon. About 400,000 Nazis found refuge in the United States. Can you tell us a little more on the scientists that were developing these programs and working with the US government? Can you expand on that a little bit? Under Operation Paperclip, 1,200 Nazis were brought to the United States, former Nazi intelligence. They were brought in to help create the CIA. Werner von Braun, the Nazi scientist that run the V1 and 2 operations, was brought in. He was one of the leaders of the NASA, and he built the first successful rockets that were launched by the US military after the Kennedy administration wanted to respond to the Soviet Union's launch of Sputnik. So we have the future almost upon us, probably here already. War from space, in which cities can be hit with firepower. The space station, to be constructed using rockets with recoverable and reusable ascent stages, would be a turret structure with a diameter of 250 feet or 76 meters. This built on the concept of a rotating wheel shaped station introduced in 1929 by the Herman Potemkin in his book The Problem of Space Travel, The Rocket Motor. The space station would spin around a central docking nave to provide artificial gravity and would be assembled in a 1,075 mile or 1,750 kilometer 2-hour height inclination Earth orbit, allowing observation of essentially every point on Earth from at least on a daily basis. WikiLeaks gave us a timeline of the space race. Behind the scenes, the US and China locked in a bitter battle to assert their power in space. The diplomatic cables were disclosed, brought out to public view, but not put on main media, of course. The main media never touch those things which are really important, in which they are controlled by those with wealth and money and power. Look, if you want to go through it all, stop and look at this particular point and you can go through the details. But as you can see, There's dates going back from 76 with a treaty which started with the US, UK and Russia agreeing not to place weapons of mass destruction in space. And so, of course, we go up to 2010. US laser plane successfully shoots down missile. Obama officially protests with the Beijing government, warns that concerns violated under the George W. Bush are still valid US policy, and so forth. Unreported important information. Dumb dogs that wouldn't bark. Papers, mainstream newspapers that won't tell us what's happening, won't tell us what's behind the real things that are happening in the world today, the important news. Dumb dogs that wouldn't bark. The FAA, Modernisation and Reform Act of 2012, calls for the full integration of civilian drones by September 2015. Additionally, the Act anticipates 30,000 drones operating by 2020. The unmanned aerial systems industry is forecast to expand from $5.9 billion to 2012 to $11.3 billion in 2021. 2012 UAS competition hosted by DARPA produced more than 140 teams and 3,500 people from 153 countries. Well, of course, that organization is part and parcel with the CIA. So what's it doing? It's organizing things for itself on a global scale. President Barack Obama's speech on NASA strategies to stop terrorist attacks on America once again showcased his skill in justifying his use of tactics created by George W. Bush while taking those anti-terror weapons away from the next president. This has happened repeatedly during Obama's administration on virtually every national security matter of substance involving our fight against terrorism. While enjoying the benefits of those programs, Mr. Obama begins the process by taking them away from the next president because he can't trust them to use such effective tools in a manner as prudent as his. He's done the same with Valent's program. Of course, he won't admit any shortcomings, but will make it clear that the next president should not have the power he currently has, that only he has been able to resist those presidential impulses to unleash the full power of the NSA CIA on the unsuspecting public. Mad Magazine, you just wonder who buys these things. But anyway, it looks like they're educating the kids. Now this one is a good one. The first 100 minutes. Now I reckon that's really good. What did I get myself into? He's sitting on the other end of the pen now, said the former Obama aide. He has more information than he did then, and he trusts himself to use these powers more than he did the Bush administration, so the New York Times reports. United States successfully tested the Falcon, which can hit a target anywhere in the world within 1 hour flying at 15,000 miles per hour, 21,000 kilometers an hour. Launched up into space and sent to hit its target. Militarization of space by the United States. New military space plane that is being tested now by the Pentagon. It has been shown its ability to stay in orbit for a year at a time. So we're talking about another vehicle here that was sent up in 2012, separate from the Falcon, that has a similar look to the space shuttle, and it's an unpiloted space drone essentially. And then with the ground stations all over the planet, the United States has established what they call downlink stations that communicate with US military satellites all over the planet. This whole network has been put into place to really give the US, as they say, in one of their planning documents, control and domination of space. What does that tell you? He causes fire to come down in the sight of men and causes them to worship the first beast, which was and which was not. The U.S. Air Force's Mystery X-37B spaceplane is nearing a major milestone, 1 year of travel in Earth's orbit, performing duties in support of long-term space objectives. The unmanned X-37B spacecraft, flying a mission known as Orbital Test Vehicle 3, launched into space atop of the Atlas V rocket from Florida's Cape Canaveral Air Force Station on December 11, 2012. The dreams of the 1950s and 60s has come to life. The German rocket scientists which were brought to America had a dream of space stations that could be used for military purposes to target places on Earth. Space vehicles that could probe or be used militarily are those things which were looked at in the 50s and 60s. Drone technology from Area 51, technology with supersonic planes that could arrive anywhere in the world within an hour. These are the dreams of the 50s and 60s which are now come to life. Imagine what now is being thought of for war purposes at this very time that will have implications for the future. If there's information at Siemens that benefits the US national interest, even if it doesn't have anything to do with national security, then they'll take that information, Snowden said. Snowden's claimed the NSA is engaged in industrial espionage follows a New York Times report earlier this month that the NSA put software in almost 100,000 computers around the world. So that is the way that the US has worked. It's through companies. That's its front, allowing it to carry out surveillance on these devices and would provide a digital highway for cyber attacks. The NSA planted most of the software after gaining access to computer networks, but has also used a secret technology that allows its entry even to computers not connected to the internet, the newspaper said, citing US officials, computer experts and documents leaked by Snowden. Newspaper said the technology had been in use since 2008, relied on a covert channel of radio waves transmitted from tiny circuit boards and USB cards secretly inserted in the computers. At one point, it meant that citizens in America could not open their garage doors because of the radio signal that was put out, which had an effect on automatic garage doors. Frequent targets of the program, codenamed Quantum, include units of the Chinese military and industrial targets. 2013 should have been an eye-opening year for those who understand prophecy and what these things mean and where this will lead to. The Bible talks of this power, allowing fire to come down in the sight of men. In Revelation 13 it speaks of this. But also, as we remember, when the Bible speaks of a nation, it also, in the other hand, is speaking who is behind that nation, talking of Satan. In this case, Satan himself, appearing as the Christ, will cause miracles in that it will be fire will come down in the sight of men. Also, in another sense, the USA, with its military might, can cause fire to come down in the sight of men from space. The ballistic missile defense system. Something that they wanted the Russians to drop. The Russians in the competition had a financial collapse, which was orchestrated by US and Vatican, but they would follow on in this mission to be the world dominators. However, the real winner is the Vatican, for the US, in all its spending, in all its efforts to gain control, will overreach and will face financial national ruin that is predicted. Then the power base will be transferred to Europe. NICAP, UFO, CIA. President Truman persuaded a reluctant Roscoe Hillenkoetter, then a rear admiral, to become a director of the Central Intelligence Agency and run the Central Intelligence Group. Under the National Security Act of 1947, he was nominated and confirmed by the US Senate as DCI, now in charge of the newly established Central Intelligence Agency. He was on the Board of Governors for NICAP from about 1957 to 1962. What does that mean? It means that he was on the Board of Governors for UFO sightings. So a director of the CIA is placed into the UFO Society to cause disinformation. Donald Edward Cahoe. During World War II, he was recalled to active duty with the ranks of major and served with the Vatican. He also was on the board, headed by Colonel Joseph Bryan III, forced Cahoe to retire as NICAP's chief. Bryan was actually a former covert CIA agent who had served as founder and head of the CIA's Psychological Warfare Division. That makes a very interesting connection at that. However, don't be fooled, because the Bible gives us more information of the powers of those things which are not seen. Evil angels can masquerade as dead loved ones who are really dead, but they masquerade as if their souls are still alive. And evil angels also can masquerade in those things which come to man's imagination, extraterrestrial beings. They are ready to reinforce the imaginings of men that refuse God. Classified Air Force Project 1794, the Avro Canadian VZ-9 was an aircraft developed by the Avro Aircraft Limited Canada as part of a secret US military project carried out in the early years of the Cold War. The first Avro car being readied at the Avro factory 1958. The operation was scaled back. Now, there have been reports of sightings of round craft and American activity after the year 2000 in Australia. These reports are confirmed by the newspaper and many sightings. It's very possible at this point of time that the USA can go into a country, not be spotted by radar, remain undetected, and gather information. If so long ago, now over 50 years since they started to experiment with this type of flying craft, surely there's been great development since that point of time. The Vatican was ever ready to go with the winning side. Daniel 2 had told us that Germany would not be, and also Revelation 13 told us that Germany would not be the winning power, that the USA would be that dominating force by which the Vatican would regain its ascendancy. It was predicted such.